Hey everyone, I'm Dami, and today I'll be doing the problem f of x is equal to x times the secant of x. In this case, this problem has to do with something called the product rule, and basically what the product rule says is that if f of x is equal to h of x times g of x, then f prime, which is the derivative, is going to have to equal the derivative of the first times g of x plus h of x times the derivative of the second. So in this case, for x times the secant of x, we're going to have f prime of x is equal to h prime of x, which in this case would be the derivative of x, which is equal to 1, multiplied by g of x, which is secant of x. Let me just write that in there. Plus h of x, which is just x, multiplied by derivative of g of x, which is equal to tangent of x times secant of x. Close parentheses. I'm going to rewrite this because it's very stuffed up. So it's just f prime of x is equal to 1 times secant x plus x times tangent of x times secant of x. And all this is supposed to equal to just secant of x plus x tangent of x times secant of x. We get secant of x because 1 times secant of x is just secant of x, because anything multiplied by 1 is just the same thing. And here, because we can't multiply x into each variable, we just have to multiply it through the whole thing, because tangent x, secant x is all one variable. So the answer becomes x tangent of x times secant of x, and this is the final answer, which is equal to f prime of x. Hello once again. The second part of my problem is f of x is equal to tangent of the square root of x squared plus 5. Because this is a chain rule, we're going to have to do things differently from the last problem. The last problem we used product rule, but here we have to use the chain rule, and the chain rule basically just states that f of g of x. That's basically the chain rule, but when you break it down, it becomes f prime of g of x multiplied by g prime of x. So in this case, we're going to have to do f prime of g of x, which would equal the derivative of tangent x would be secant squared of x but in this case, x would be just the square root, x would just be x squared plus 5. So that's the first part, and then we have to multiply this by g prime of x. And g prime of x, well, g of x here would equal the square root of x squared plus 5. So if we're trying to find g prime of x, well, let me write that. G of x is equal to x squared plus 5. So g prime of x is equal to, here's the tricky part because x squared plus 5 is under a square root, but calculus has taught us that you can easily change that into x squared plus 5 to the 1/2, because anything to the square root is basically just a 1/2. So doing the derivative, let me erase all of this. The derivative of that would be x squared plus 5 to the 1/2, which would equal 1/2 times x squared plus 5 times the derivative of the inside of this parentheses, which would just equal 2x. And because we did the derivative of this whole thing, you take away 1 from the number count of the derivative and you get negative 1/2. Having this right here is going to turn this side of the equation into 1 over 2, which is this 2, bringing it down here, times x squared plus 5 to the 1/2. But as I said before, the 1/2 is basically just the square root. So this is equal to 1 over 2 times the square root of x squared plus 5. And then we multiply that by 2 of x, which will give us times 2 of x, which is just the same thing as 2 of x over 2 times the square root of x squared plus 5. That is the answer for g prime of x. So now I'm going to erase that and do the chain rule again, which I'm going to say again, which f prime of g of x times g prime of x. First, when we did f prime of g of x, we got secant squared times the square root of x squared plus 5, close that parentheses, and then you have to multiply it by g prime of x, which we got 2 of x over 2 times square root of x squared plus 5, close parentheses. When you get this, all you have to do now is multiply, which you will get. Basically everything is on top of 2 times the square root of x squared plus 5. So you will get secant squared of square root of x squared plus 5 multiplied by 2 of x. But you would put the 2 of x here in front of the secant squared because you can put it anywhere, but it would make more sense to put it in front of the equation so that you know you're multiplying 2 of x times secant squared of x. And all of this is under 2 times x squared plus 5. In this case, you can even go farther and just change it into x times secant squared of x squared, square root of x squared plus 5, close parentheses, over square root of x squared plus 5. Because you can easily just cancel this 2 and this 2 and make the equation simpler. So f prime of x is equal to x times the secant squared of the square root of x squared plus 5 close parentheses, over the square root of x squared plus 5. And that right here is the final answer to f of x, which is equal to tangent the square root of x squared plus 5.